In the dusty garage, at the edge of a forgotten desert town, time seems to stand still. Manny Martinez's weathered hands move with practiced precision over an engine that 3 other mechanics declared beyond salvation. The luxury car's gleaming exterior contrasts sharply with his humble workshop, where spare parts hang like memories of better days. Its owner, Claudia Sinclair, watches from the doorway, her tailored suit as out of place as a diamond in the dust. What neither realizes is that this chance encounter will change not just their lives, but the fate of an entire community. Could one broken engine be the key that unlocks a billion-dollar secret buried in this desert town? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted long shadows across Manny's workbench, where his father's old toolbox sat like a sentinel watching over the day's work. Each morning for 23 years, he'd opened that battered red box the same way, right latch. First, then left, letting the familiar creak of its hinges mark the start of another day at Martinez Auto Repair. "Time to wake up, Pop," he murmured, touching the faded photograph tucked inside the lid. His father's smile, captured in afternoon light just like this, hadn't dimmed in the decades since he'd passed. The tools inside, each one purchased with careful consideration, maintained with reverence, and used with expertise, were as much a part of his inheritance as the garage itself. Manny pulled out a socket wrench, its chrome surface worn smooth by generations of use. Outside, Vale Vista's main street was already heating up, the asphalt shimmering like a mirage. Where once there had been a dozen thriving businesses, now only faded signs and empty windows remained. The bank had closed 2 years ago, followed by the hardware store. Even old Jim's Diner, a fixture since the 1960s, had finally surrendered to the inevitable last spring. The youth center across the street was the last holdout besides his garage. Miss Sarah still opened its doors every afternoon, giving the town's kids somewhere to go after school, though Lord knew how she kept the lights on. Manny did what he could, fixing the ancient air conditioning unit for free, replacing electrical fixtures with donated parts, but it wasn't enough. Nothing seemed to be enough these days. A sharp rap on the garage doorframe pulled him from his thoughts. Tommy Garcia, all of 16 and already showing the same intuitive touch with engines that Manny had at his age, stood shifting from foot to foot. "Morning, Mr. Martinez. Got time to show me that timing belt trick today?" Manny smiled, gesturing the boy inside. Tommy was one of Miss Sarah's success stories, a kid who'd found purpose in the purr of a well-tuned engine rather than the trouble that seemed to find too many of Vale Vista's youth. "Come on in, mijo. Mrs. Henderson's Buick can wait a few minutes while I show you something your old teacher's dad taught him back in '82. As he walked Tommy through the delicate process of setting timing without specialized tools, Manny felt the familiar ache of memories. His father had stood right here, explaining these same principles, his patience as infinite as his knowledge had seemed. "You see, Tommy, every engine tells a story. You just have to learn its language." The lesson was interrupted by the distant sound of a struggling engine, expensive-sounding, European, and in serious distress. Manny's practiced ear could already diagnose at least 3 probable issues before the vehicle even came into view. "Sounds like trouble," Tommy said, already reaching for the diagnostic scanner. "Sounds like opportunity," Manny corrected, though his expression was grim. Cars like that, the kind that cost more than he made in a year, usually meant trouble. Of a different sort. Their owners tended to look at his modest shop, his small-town location, and decide their precious vehicles deserved better. Never mind that he'd kept half the town's cars running through sheer ingenuity when parts were scarce and money scarcer. The sound grew louder, accompanied now by an ominous clicking that made Manny wince. "Tommy, better head on over to Miss Sarah's. Something tells me this might be a complicated one." As the boy reluctantly gathered his backpack, Manny pulled out his father's favorite diagnostic tools, Whatever was coming down that sun-baked road, he'd face it the way Miguel Martinez had taught him, with skill, integrity, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing every engine, no matter how exotic, still followed the same fundamental laws. "Watch and learn, Pop," he whispered to the photograph as the sound of mechanical distress grew closer. This one might be interesting. Claudia Sinclair hadn't achieved her position as CEO of Sinclair Developments by accepting defeat. The leather portfolio on her passenger seat contained acquisition plans worth $3 billion. Plans that were becoming increasingly worthless with every sputter of her Bentley's engine. She glanced at her watch. 4 hours until the board meeting that would cement her legacy or destroy it. The car's navigation system had died 20 minutes ago, along with most of the electronics. Now, crawling through what appeared to be a town time had forgotten. She felt the careful construction of her day crumbling. The portfolio mocked her with its pristine efficiency, detailed timelines, ruthlessly negotiated terms, and contingency plans for every scenario except this one. The engine made a sound that, even to her untrained ear, spoke of surrender. Ahead, a faded sign reading "Martinez Auto Repair" hung over a garage that had seen better decades. Her phone showed no bars, of course, but she caught sight of a young boy hurrying away from the garage, casting curious glances over his shoulder. As the Bentley rolled to a final, dignified stop, Claudia allowed herself exactly 5 seconds of closed-eye frustration. She'd built her reputation by turning failing companies into profit centers, streamlining operations that others had deemed hopeless. Now, here she sat, undone by simple mechanics. The garage's interior was dark after the desert sun, and for a moment all she could see was the silhouette of a man wiping his hands on a shop rag. The sense of oil, metal, and something else, history perhaps, filled the air. "Welcome to Martinez Auto," the man said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet confidence she usually heard in boardrooms. "Sounds like you've got a troubled timing." "Jane, among other things." Claudia straightened, adjusting her blazer out of habit. "I need this vehicle operational within the hour. Money is no object, but time is critical. I have a meeting in Phoenix that will determine the future of a $3 billion acquisition." The mechanic, Martinez presumably, didn't react to the figure. Instead, he moved to the Bentley's hood with the same careful precision she'd seen master craftsmen use when examining rare artifacts. "These engines," he said, reaching for a flashlight, "they're not just machinery. They're stories waiting to be read." "I don't need stories, Mr. Martinez. I need solutions." He smiled slightly, reminding her inexplicably of her grandfather, the last true mechanic she'd known, before family ambition had replaced motor oil with fountain pen ink. "Sometimes they're the same thing." He leaned in, flashlight beam dancing over the engine's components. "3 other shops turned you away, didn't they?" Claudia felt her eyebrows rise. "How did you—" "The diagnostic port has been accessed multiple times recently. Different tools, different techniques, all wrong." He straightened up. "They saw the surface problem, but engines, like most things worth understanding, have layers." Something in his tone made her check her reflexive dismissal. She'd built her career on recognizing competence, even in unexpected places. How long? To do it right, 3 hours minimum? That's impossible. "I need to be in Phoenix by Ms. Sinclair," he interrupted, and she realized she hadn't told him her name. "There are 2 ways to fix an engine. The quick way, which in this case won't get you 50 miles, or the right way, which will have this engine running better than factory spec. You look like someone who understands the value of doing things properly." Their eyes met across the engine bay, and Claudia felt an unexpected shift in her carefully ordered world. Here, surrounded by tools she couldn't name, and problems she couldn't solve, the portfolio's weight seemed suddenly less significant. 3 hours, she said finally, reaching for her phone. "I'll need to make some calls." Manny nodded, already turning toward his toolbox. "There's a diner 2 blocks over. The coffee's terrible, but the pie makes up for it." He paused, hands hovering over his tools. "Unless you'd prefer to watch." Your grandfather might have taught you a thing or two about engines. This time it was Claudia's turn to raise an eyebrow. The calluses on your hands, he explained. Same pattern my father had. Runs in families, that kind of work, even when some of us choose different paths. She looked down at her manicured hands, remembering the feeling of cold metal and warm oil from decades ago. Perhaps, she said carefully, I'll stay for a few minutes. Purely to ensure quality control, of course. Of course, Manny agreed and began to work. The diagnostic report printed slowly from Manny's ancient machine, its dot matrix chattering a counterpoint to the soft classical music playing from the garage's battered radio. Claudia found herself oddly fascinated by the methodical way he worked, so different from the frantic energy of her corporate troubleshooters. Your engine management system has cascading failures, Manny explained, highlighting sections of the report with a practiced eye. The other shops saw the timing chain issue, but missed the underlying cause. See these voltage fluctuations? They're not random. She leaned closer, her designer perfume mingling with the shop's honest scents. Someone modified the electronics. Better. There was quiet admiration in his voice. Someone tried to make it better. Custom programming, specialized parts, all top-tier work except for one small detail they overlooked. He traced a pattern in the data. Your grandfather would have spotted it immediately. You seem very certain about my grandfather, Manny smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. The way you've been watching my hands as I work, that's not corporate curiosity, that's muscle memory. You've held these tools before, probably learned on something classic. Jaguar, maybe? Late 60s? 1965 E-type, Claudia admitted, surprising herself. He insisted I understand engines before he'd let me drive it. I haven't thought about that car in years. The phone in her pocket buzzed again. The fifth call from her assistant in an hour. But for the first time today, she let it go to voicemail. Instead, she watched as Manny began disassembling the engine with surgical precision. The problem, he continued, is that custom engineering requires something beyond technical skill. It needs... He paused, selecting a specialized tool from his father's box. Respect for the original design. Someone tried to force this engine to be something it wasn't meant to be. The parallel to her corporate work wasn't lost on her. How many companies had she stripped down and restructured, forcing efficiency at the cost of character? These modifications, she said, gesturing to the engine. They were expensive? Very. Professional work, top materials, but expensive doesn't always mean right. He extracted a component she didn't recognize, holding it up to the light. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one, if you understand the fundamentals. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message that made her breath catch. The board was threatening to proceed without her. Billions in hostile takeover funds were poised to move, and here she stood in a desert garage, discussing engineering philosophy with a man who seemed to read engines like she read balance sheets. Mr. Martinez. Manny, he corrected, not looking up from his work. Manny, I appreciate the craftsmanship, but I need to know if this can be fixed today. My board is losing patience, and this acquisition, he straightened, fixing her with a look that reminded her of her grandfather's rare moments of absolute seriousness. Ms. Sinclair, right now, your engine is like one of those companies you acquire. Someone tried to force it to perform beyond its design limits without understanding its true potential. I can reset it to factory specifications in about 2 hours, and it will run perfectly fine. Or, she found herself holding her breath, or I can show you what this engine is really capable of, if we work with its nature instead of against it. That's the 3-hour solution, but it requires something that might be in short supply in your world, which is trust. He held up the modified component. Trust in the original design, trust in time-tested principles, and trust that sometimes the path to true potential isn't the one that looks most efficient on paper. Claudia glanced at her phone again, Then at the diagnostic report with its complex dance of numbers and warnings. In the corner, she noticed handwritten notes in a careful script that had to be Manny's father's, annotations from decades of experience. She thought of her grandfather's voice. An engine will tell you what it needs if you learn to listen. 3 hours, she said finally, and was surprised to feel tension leaving her shoulders. Show me what you mean about working with its nature. Manny nodded, reaching for his father's toolbox. In that case, you might want to roll up those sleeves. Some lessons are best learned hands-on. To her own astonishment, Claudia found herself doing exactly that. The yellowed newspaper clipping caught Claudia's eye, while Manny was deep in the Bentley's engine bay. It hung in a simple frame behind his desk. Vale Vista named fastest-growing community in Southwest, 1962. The black and white photograph showed a thriving Main Street, American-made cars gleaming in front of bustling shops, and a sense of prosperity that seemed almost mythical now. My father kept that to remind us, Manny said, noticing her interest as he straightened up, wiping grime from his hands. Not of what we lost, but of what's still possible. Claudia moved closer to the photograph, her trained eye noting details that would have escaped most observers. The careful urban planning, the strategic placement of businesses, the infrastructure clearly built with expansion in mind. What happened? Progress. He said it without bitterness, just quiet understanding. The interstate went 40 miles east. The mining company found cheaper labor overseas. The usual story of small-town America? He gestured toward the window. But look closer. She followed his gaze. Beyond the immediate decay of Main Street, she saw things her corporate instincts had missed earlier. The bones of the buildings were solid. The power grid infrastructure was surprisingly robust. And most importantly, she saw people. Not many, but those she did see moved with purpose. The youth center, Manny continued, turning back to the engine. That's our heartbeat now. Miss Sarah keeps it running on pure determination and whatever donations we can scrape together. Every kid who finds their path there is one more reason. This town hasn't given up. A memory surfaced, her grandfather's voice again, speaking of his own hometown. Communities are like engines, Claudia. They need maintenance, care, and sometimes just one person who sees their true potential. She watched Manny work, his movements efficient yet almost tender. The same care she'd seen in the engine was reflected in how he spoke about the town. It struck her that both were acts of preservation, not just maintaining what was, but protecting what could be. The center, she found herself asking, what does it need most, besides money? He smiled slightly. Hope. Something to show these kids that skill and dedication still matter in a world that seems to value neither. His hands moved steadily, making adjustments that seemed to flow from intuition as much as expertise. Tommy, the boy you saw earlier, he's got a gift for this work. Natural talent I haven't seen since... He paused. Since you? She suggested. Since my father, he corrected. But without proper tools, training opportunities, well, talent only goes so far without nurturing. Claudia's phone buzzed again, another board message, more urgent than the last. But for the first time in years, the financial figures swimming before her eyes seemed to lack their usual weight. She found herself thinking instead about potential, of a different kind. You mentioned other shops turned me away, she said carefully. Why didn't you? Manny's hand stilled on the engine. Because every failure is an opportunity to learn. Those other mechanics saw a problem too complex to risk their reputations on. I saw a chance to prove that sometimes the old ways, the careful ways, still have value. He glanced at her. Something tells me you understand that better than most. She did. In her world of leveraged buyouts and hostile takeovers, she'd forgotten the satisfaction of building rather than merely acquiring. The pleasure of seeing potential where others saw only liability. The diagnostic machine beeped, drawing their attention. Manny studied the readout, a smile touching his lips. Well, Miss Sinclair, would you like to see something interesting? More. Interesting than missing my board meeting? Much more. He gestured to the engine. Your grandfather taught you about timing chains. Want to see what 30 years of experience can add to those lessons? Claudia looked at her phone one last time, then set it aside. Show me. As Manny began explaining, she found herself thinking of that old photograph. Sometimes, she realized, you had to look backward to see the way forward clearly. The security camera in the corner of Manny's garage captured an unusual scene that evening. Its grainy feed showed the unlikely pair still working as sunset painted the workshop walls in amber hues. Claudia had long since discarded her blazer. Her silk blouse traded for one of Manny's spare work shirts. Her carefully manicured hands were now smudged with honest dirt, and her expression showed something foreign to her board members. Genuine fascination. Watch the voltage reading, Manny was saying, gesturing to the diagnostic display. See how it stabilizes when we adjust the timing. That's what the modified system was fighting against. The camera's small red light blinked steadily, recording Claudia's nod of understanding. In her corporate world, such cameras were tools of surveillance and control. Here, the ancient security system seemed more like a faithful observer, witnessing the gradual transformation of both machine and people. My grandfather would have loved this, Claudia said, her voice carrying clearly in the evening quiet. He always said modern cars tried too hard to outsmart their drivers. Smart man. Manny's response was accompanied by the soft click of precision tools. These high-end modifications, they're like corporate restructuring, impressive on paper, but sometimes they miss the soul of what they're trying to improve. The camera caught Claudia's slight flinch at his words. She turned, studying the wall of photographs behind his workbench, decades of local history captured in fading Polaroids and carefully preserved snapshots. You've seen a lot of changes. Here, mostly seen things stay the same while the world changed around us. Manny straightened up, stretching his back. That's not always a bad thing. Some values are worth preserving. Through the garage's open door they could hear children's voices from the youth center. The evening program was in full swing, Miss Sarah's gentle encouragement mixing with the sound of teenage laughter. The camera's angle shifted slightly as a warm breeze stirred the dust motes, dancing in the dying sunlight. Claudia's phone lay, forgotten on the workbench, its screen occasionally lighting up with increasingly urgent messages. But her attention remained fixed on the engine, on Manny's patient explanations, on the gradual revelation of something she'd forgotten she knew. You're bored, Manny said carefully, not looking up from his work. They're probably not happy about the delay. They're never happy, she replied, surprising herself with her candor. Happiness isn't a metric we measure. She paused, watching him make another precise adjustment. When did you know? Know what? Who I was? You've been reading corporate acquisitions reports, haven't you? I saw them under the repair manuals. The camera caught his slight smile. My father taught me to understand the whole machine, not just the part that's broken. Vale Vista might be small, but we still get the news. Sinclair Developments has been busy lately. A comfortable silence fell, broken only by the quiet sounds of mechanical surgery and distant youth center activity. The security feed captured the moment Claudia picked up a wrench, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence as muscle memory from decades ago returned. Tommy reminds me of you, Manny said eventually, the way you handle tools. It's not learned, it's remembered, like riding a bicycle or... He paused, selecting another tool, or remembering who you wanted to be before life had other plans. The camera's unblinking eye recorded Claudia's stillness at his words. In its frame she seemed caught between two worlds, the corporate warrior and the young woman who had once found joy in the simple perfection of a well-tuned engine. Sometimes, she said quietly, success feels like failure in disguise. And sometimes, Manny responded, what looks like failure is just potential waiting to be recognized. Outside, the desert night was settling in, stars emerging in the vast sky above Vale Vista. The security camera's feed showed two people working in comfortable sync, their shadows long against the workshop wall. To an observer, it might have seemed like any other evening repair job, but the camera, in its silent vigilance, recorded something more. The precise moment when Claudia Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Developments, began to see a different kind of opportunity in the fading light of a desert town. The invoice pad was decades old, its pages yellow with age, each one bearing the faded letterhead Martinez Auto Repair, quality work at fair prices. Manny's father had ordered 10,000 sheets back in 1975, believing in the future of Vale. Vista with the same certainty he'd applied to rebuilding engines. Now, as Manny pulled out the pad, less than 100 pages remained, a testament to time's steady march. The Bentley purred with renewed vitality in the background, its engine note now carrying the kind of harmony that only came from true craftsmanship. Claudia stood beside it, her transformed appearance, oil-stained work shirt, smudged hands, loosened hair, matching the transformation in the machine. The total comes to... Manny began, but Claudia was already reaching for her purse. Whatever. It is, double it, she said, pulling out a sleek checkbook. I've never seen work like this, not since... No charge, Manny interrupted, placing his father's old invoice pad back in its drawer. Claudia's hand stopped mid-motion. I don't understand. Your engine, he explained, wiping his hands on a shop. Rag, it taught me something new. That's payment enough. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But if you're feeling generous, there might be another way to settle the debt. The evening air carried the sound of children leaving the youth center, their voices mixing with Miss Sarah's patient reminders about tomorrow's homework. Claudia followed Manny's glance toward the building across the street, its paint peeling. But its windows still bright with welcome. The center needs more than just repairs, he continued. Those kids, they're like engines themselves, full of potential, just waiting for the right tools, the right guidance. He reached into his father's toolbox, pulling out a folded piece of paper. I've been keeping a list, things the center needs, opportunities we could provide if we had the resources. Claudia took the paper, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was neat, methodical, the same precision she'd watched him apply to her engine, equipment for a technical training program, computers, educational materials, a proper HVAC system. The list went on, each item carefully researched and costed out. You've put a lot of thought into this, she said quietly. Every time I turn away a kid who wants to learn, every time I see talent going to waste because we can't provide the right opportunities. He shook his head. Well, it's like watching a precision engine run on cheap fuel. You can see the potential being wasted. Her phone buzzed again, probably the board's final ultimatum. But now the sound seemed to come from a different world, one that suddenly felt less real than the oil-stained concrete beneath her feet. Why show me this? Manny met her gaze steadily. Because you understand both worlds. The one where quarterly profits drive every decision, and the one where value is measured in lives changed and potential realized. He gestured to the Bentley. That engine wasn't just broken, it was modified by people who saw power as the only measure of success. They never understood that true performance comes from harmony, from building on solid foundations. Claudia looked down at her hands, still bearing the honest dirt of real work. She thought of her grandfather again, of lessons learned in quiet moments beneath an open hood, of value measured in more than money. The center, she said slowly. How many kids could it help with proper funding? Dozens, maybe hundreds over time. But it's not just about numbers. He smiled slightly, though I suspect that's a language you understand well. She folded the list carefully, tucking it into her pocket alongside her phone with its urgent messages and demands. I should go. Phoenix is still 3 hours away, and the board will do what boards do, Manny finished. But maybe now the engine will give you time to think clearly on the drive. As Claudia settled into the Bentley's leather seat, She caught sight of Tommy returning to the garage, his young face eager for another lesson. She watched through the rearview mirror as Manny welcomed him back, their shared enthusiasm for engines bridging age and circumstance. The invoice pad remained in its drawer, blank and waiting. But something else had been exchanged in that garage. Something that couldn't be quantified in dollars or recorded in corporate ledgers. As she pulled away, the engine's perfect rhythm seemed to whisper of possibilities she'd forgotten how to hear. The corporate takeover documents lay spread across the Bentley's passenger seat, their pristine pages stark against the leather. As Claudia drove through the desert night, the engine's perfect rhythm accompanied her hands-free conference call, each board member's voice more strident than the last. The Kensington Group won't wait another hour, Harrison Parker, her lead counsel, was saying. $3 billion in hostile takeover funds are ready to move. If we don't strike now, then what? Claudia interrupted, her fingers tapping the steering wheel where traces of engine grease still marked her skin. They'll acquire another struggling company? Strip its assets? Lay off its workforce? The words tasted different now. They're familiar. Corporate efficiency somehow hollow. Claudia, Elizabeth Chen, her CFO, cut in. You're not going soft on us. This is what we do. This is what you do. Better than anyone. The highway stretched ahead, empty and dark. In her rearview mirror, Vale Vista's lights grew smaller, but the weight of Manny's folded proposal in her jacket pocket seemed to grow heavier with each mile. Pull up the satellite imagery of the target acquisition zone, she instructed, activating her dashboard display. The board complied, and digital maps replaced her view of the darkness. Property boundaries, zoning information, and development. Projections overlaid the terrain like a corporate fever dream. The demographics support our strategy, Harrison continued. The area's been in decline for decades. Property values are at rock bottom. Once we announce the technology corridor development, show me Vale Vista, Claudia commanded suddenly. Northwest quadrant, same overlay. A moment of confused silence followed, then the maps shifted. She watched as the familiar streets of the town she'd just left appeared in cold satellite relief. The youth center, Manny's garage, the empty storefronts, waiting for resurrection. I don't understand, Elizabeth said. That's nowhere near the target zone. It's just another dying town. Is it? Claudia zoomed the map out slightly. Look at the infrastructure grid, the power capacity, the municipal water rights, the railroad access that everyone's forgotten about. Her mind was racing now. Years of corporate instinct merging with something newer, or perhaps something very old, learned at her grandfather's side. Claudia, Harrison's voice had taken on the careful tone he used with difficult clients, whatever local color you've encountered during your delay, you can't let it cloud your judgment. The Kensington deal is exactly what everyone expects us to do. The engine's steady pulse seemed to agree with her words. Tell me, when was the last time we built something instead of just acquiring it? More silence. The board member's breathing carried through her speakers, heavy with confusion and growing concern. Send me the geological surveys for Vale Vista, she ordered. Water table reports, mineral rights assessments, everything we have. And get me property ownership maps for a 20-mile radius. You can't be serious, Elizabeth protested. The board won't approve. The board approved my leadership. Because I see opportunities others miss. Claudia's voice carried the same quiet confidence she'd heard in Manny's garage. Harrison, how much would it cost to acquire controlling interests in Vale Vista's commercial district? The sound of rapid typing filled the call. At current market rates, a fraction of the Kensington budget. But Claudia, the development potential is exactly what everyone else has overlooked. She thought of Tommy's eager face, of Miss Sarah's dedication, of Manny's careful hands preserving both machines. And hope. Sometimes you have to look beneath the surface modifications to see what's really possible. The shareholders, Elizabeth began. Will see what I see, Claudia cut her off, once I show them how to look properly. She accelerated slightly, the engine responding with elegant precision. Harrison, draft purchase proposals for every commercial. Property in Vale Vista. Elizabeth, run projections for a technical training center, commercial revitalization, and light industrial development. I want everything ready for my arrival, and the Kensington deal. Harrison's voice was faint now, like an echo from another life. Claudia smiled, feeling the steady pulse of the engine and the weight of Manny's proposal against her heart. Tell. The Miss Sinclair sends her regrets. We found a better opportunity for building long-term value. She ended the call, letting the desert night fill her car with silence. The engine hummed its approval, carrying her toward Phoenix and a future that looked nothing like her carefully laid plans, and everything like her grandfather's dreams. Miss Sarah kept every thank you card the children had ever made, arranged carefully on the youth center's bulletin board like precious artifacts. As she showed them to Manny the next morning, each one told a story of lives touched and futures redirected. Construction paper hearts, crayon drawings, and earnest messages in developing handwriting, a tapestry of hope woven from the simplest materials. Tommy's first card, she said, pointing to one from 3 years ago. The careful drawing showed a car engine, surprisingly detailed for a 13-year-old's work. Right after you started teaching him about carburetors. Remember how angry he used to be? Manny nodded, recalling the frustrated boy who'd once kicked his garage's door, rage masking deeper pain. Now that same boy was teaching younger kids basic mechanics, his patience matching his growing expertise. Maria Rodriguez's college acceptance letter, Miss Sarah continued, touching another paper. She wrote that your lessons about diagnostic thinking helped her ace her science courses. Her finger moved to a newer edition. And this one, from Joey Martinez, no relation, after you helped him turn his grades around by explaining math through engine timing calculations. The morning sun streamed through windows that needed washing, casting warm light on decades of similar stories captured in children's handwriting. Each card represented a moment when possibility overcame circumstance, when caring adults showed young minds their own potential. The roof still leaks when it rains, Miss Sarah said quietly, glancing up at water stains on the ceiling. The air conditioning barely works, and half our computers are older than our students, but somehow they keep coming, keep learning, keep hoping. Manny touched one of the newer cards, this one showing a detailed sketch of his father's old toolbox. They come because you never stopped believing in them, Sarah, just like Pop never stopped believing in this town. The sound of approaching footsteps made them turn. Tommy stood in the doorway, 2 younger boys hovering nervously behind him. Mr. Martinez? I was wondering if, well, David and Michael here, they're really good with computers. Even got that ancient printer working again. I thought maybe bring them over to the garage, Manny said, understanding immediately. I've got a diagnostic system that could use some young minds to figure it out. The boys' faces lit up, hope breaking through. Their teenage attempts at cool detachment. Another card would probably join the board soon. Another thread in the community's fabric. You know, Miss Sarah said after the boys left. That corporate woman yesterday, Ms. Sinclair, something was different about her, the way she watched. Tommy work? The questions she asked about the center? She paused, straightening a crooked card. It reminded me of how you look at engines, like you're seeing past the surface to something deeper. Manny smiled slightly, remembering Claudia's transformation in his garage. Sometimes people are like engines. They just need someone to recognize their true potential. The morning light caught the glitter on a recent thank you card, making it sparkle like desert stars. Outside, Vale Vista was waking up. Another day of struggle and hope, of small victories and quiet determination. Manny, Miss Sarah said suddenly, did you show her the plans? The ones you drew up for the training program? He nodded, thinking of the careful list now traveling toward Phoenix in an expensive jacket pocket. She saw something here, Sarah. Something beyond quarterly reports and profit margins. He touched another card, this one showing the youth center surrounded by smiling stick figures. She saw what we see every day. The The sound of children arriving for morning programs began to fill the building. Young voices carried through the old halls, full of energy and possibility. Miss Sarah began her daily routine, checking supplies, straightening chairs, preparing to nurture another day's worth of dreams. "Well," she said, adjusting her reading glasses, "I suppose we'll see. Though in all my years of teaching I've learned one thing. You can't spend time with these kids and not be changed by their potential." Manny looked at the wall of cards one last time before heading back to his garage. Each one was a promise. Kept, a future shaped, a life touched by simple acts of belief. Whatever Claudia decided, this wall stood as testament to what was possible when people saw past surface appearances to the true engine of community, hope, powered by love and maintained by dedication. The morning sun followed him across the street, casting his shadow ahead like a promise of things to come. The land deed lay on Claudia's Phoenix hotel desk, its age-yellowed pages contrasting with her modern laptop's blue glow. Her corporate research team had outdone themselves, delivering a century's worth of Vale Vista property records before sunrise. But it was this particular document, dated 1923, that had captured her full attention. "Water rights," she murmured, tracing the elegant cursive with a finger still bearing traces of engine grease. "Unrestricted access to the aquifer and mineral. Rights extending to bedrock." She looked up at Harrison, who had flown in from New York overnight. Why didn't anyone spot this before? Her counsel shuffled uncomfortably. The records were buried in county archives. Most developers only looked at surface value, empty buildings, declining population. Nobody thought to dig deeper. Just like nobody thought to look past my engine's surface problems, Claudia said softly, remembering Manny's careful diagnosis. She turned to the geological surveys spread across her bed. "Show me the aquifer projections again." Harrison pulled up a digital map on her laptop. "The underground water reserve is vast, one of the largest unmapped aquifers in the southwest, and with the railroad access still legally preserved from the mining days. We're not looking at a dying town," Claudia finished. "We're looking at an untapped wellspring." She stood, moving to the window where the desert sunrise painted the sky in shades of promise. "How many other companies have reviewed Vale Vista's potential?" 3 major developers in the last decade. Harrison consulted his tablet. All passed. They were looking for quick turnaround properties, strip malls, warehouse space, surface. "Modifications," Claudia interrupted, "without understanding the fundamental design." She turned back to the deed, its careful penmanship recording a vision of the future that no one had fully grasped. "What's the current asking price for the downtown commercial district?" Harrison named a figure that made them both wince, but for opposite reasons. To him, it represented wasted capital. To Claudia, it was the bargain of a lifetime. "The board will fight you on this," he warned. "It's not our usual type of acquisition. They're expecting the Kensington deal." "The board," Claudia said firmly, "hired me for my vision." She picked up her phone, showing him the photos she'd taken of the youth center's thank you cards. "Look past the peeling paint and empty storefronts. This town has something more valuable than quick profits." "Which is?" "Foundation, community, the raw materials for sustainable growth." She spread out the geological surveys like a general planning. "A campaign. That aquifer isn't just water, it's life. Agricultural potential, sustainable development, tech companies looking for reliable cooling sources for data centers." Her finger traced the old railroad lines. "And these tracks? They're not dead infrastructure. They're arteries waiting to pump new life into the region." Harrison studied her carefully. "You've changed since yesterday." "No," she corrected, thinking of her grandfather's garage, of lessons learned under open hoods. "I've remembered. Sometimes you have to strip away the accumulated rust to find the original purpose." She pulled out Manny's proposal for the youth center, unfolding it reverently. "Start with this, a technical training center, but expanded. Modern equipment, apprenticeship programs, partnerships with tech firms. Her vision was building momentum like a perfectly tuned engine. Those kids learning in Manny's garage, they're not just fixing cars, they're proving that talent can flourish anywhere if given the right tools. And the board, Harrison pressed. How do we sell them on social investment over immediate returns? Claudia smiled, the same smile that had made her reputation in 100 boardrooms. By showing them what Manny showed me, that true value isn't always visible at first glance. She gestured to her laptop, where property values and projection models glowed. Run the numbers on sustainable development, factor in the water rights, the railroad access, the potential for technical education partnerships, show them a 10-year growth plan instead of a quarterly profit spike. She picked up the old deed again, its promises recorded in fading ink, still legally binding. Vale Vista doesn't need to be stripped for parts or modified beyond recognition. It needs to be restored, like my engine, brought back to its original purpose, and then enhanced, not replaced. Harrison looked at his watch. The board meets in 2 hours. Then we better get to work. Claudia sat down at her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys. It's time to show them how to look beneath the surface and see what's possible when you understand the true design of things. The desert. Sun climbed higher, its light catching the deed's official seal, like a glimmer of gold, long buried, finally rediscovered. The board's ultimatum arrived by email at 9:47 a.m., its formal language barely masking the threat beneath. On Claudia's hotel room's wall-mounted display, the message cast a harsh glow across the scattered papers of her alternative proposal for Vale Vista. Miss Sinclair, the Board of Directors requires your immediate confirmation of the Kensington acquisition strategy as previously approved. Your recent communications suggesting an alternate investment have caused serious concern among key shareholders. We remind you that your contract explicitly grants the board authority to review and potentially terminate leadership positions in cases of significant strategic deviation. You have until 10 a.m. to confirm your commitment to the Kensington deal. Regards. Charles Whitman, Chairman, Board of Directors, 12 minutes. Claudia stood at the window, watching the desert sun climb over Phoenix's steel and glass towers. Behind her, Harrison nervously shuffled through the Vale Vista projection models they'd spent the night preparing. We could split the difference, he suggested, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years of corporate compromises. Take the Kensington deal now, then look at Vale Vista as a secondary project next quarter. Claudia touched her phone's screen, bringing up the photo she'd taken of Manny's garage. The image showed his father's toolbox, worn with decades of honest work. You can't serve two masters, Harrison. Either you believe in building something real or you don't. The shareholders want return on investment. She turned from the window, but they've forgotten what real investment looks like. She gestured to the geological surveys and property assessments spread across every surface. Vale Vista isn't just a real estate play. It's a template for sustainable development, water rights, railroad infrastructure, an educated workforce in the making. Her phone buzzed with another message, Elizabeth Chen, her CFO, making one last plea for conventional wisdom. 9 minutes remaining. Remember what you taught me when I first joined the board? Harrison asked quietly. Never let emotion cloud. Business judgment. No, Claudia corrected, thinking of Manny's words about engines and understanding. I taught you to recognize the difference between surface appearances and underlying value. She picked up the youth center proposal, its pages, now annotated with financial projections and development timelines. This isn't emotion. This is seeing potential where others see only liability. 7 minutes. The morning sun caught her cufflinks, her grandfather's, worn today for the first time in years. They bore the image of a wrench crossed with a pen, his way of bridging the worlds of craft and commerce. The Kensington deal is safe, Harrison pressed. Proven strategy, guaranteed returns. Safe. Claudia's laugh held no humor. Like the safe modifications that nearly destroyed my engine. Sometimes the safe path is just slow failure in disguise. 5 minutes. Her phone screen lit up with Tommy's face, a photo she'd taken in the garage, his young features bright with the joy of understanding how things worked. Behind him, the wall of thank you cards told stories of lives transformed by people who dared to look past surface decay. "If we lose this vote," Harrison warned, "your position is just a title." Claudia straightened, feeling the same clarity she'd experienced in Manny's garage. "But our choices, those define us." 3 minutes. She looked at her laptop, where 2 documents waited: the Kensington acquisition authorization and her proposal. For Vale Vista's renaissance, 20 years of corporate success balanced against a vision of something more meaningful. "Harrison," she said quietly, "what do you see when you look at Vale Vista's projections? Not the quarterly numbers, really." "Look," he studied the documents, his expressions slowly shifting. "Sustainable growth, community development, a template that could be replicated in other struggling towns." He paused. "A legacy." 1 minute. Claudia's fingers hovered over her keyboard. In her mind, she heard the perfect rhythm of her restored engine, felt the weight of Manny's trust, saw the possibility in Tommy's eyes. "Sometimes," she murmured, "you have to strip everything down to fundamentals before you can build something true." The clock struck 10 a.m. With steady hands, she began to type her response to the board. Outside, the desert sun reached its full morning brilliance, casting long shadows that pointed like arrows toward a future not yet written, but finally clear. The corporate acquisition contract lay before Claudia like a crossroads made manifest. Its 100 pages of legal precision, bound in expensive leather, represented everything she'd spent 20 years pursuing. With trembling fingers, she lifted the cover page and began to read her own response to the board aloud. "Gentlemen and ladies of the board, for 2 decades, I've led Sinclair Developments in acquiring undervalued assets. Today, I'm choosing to do something different. I'm choosing to build value instead of merely extracting it." Harrison sat motionless in the corner of the hotel room as she continued reading, her voice growing stronger with each word. "The Kensington acquisition represents our old paradigm, efficient, profitable, and ultimately hollow. Instead, I am committing my personal fortune and corporate influence to the revitalization of Vale Vista, starting with an investment in its youth technical training center." She paused, running her fingers over the contract's gold embossing. 20 years of similar documents had passed under her pen, each one a victory by old metrics. Now they felt like chapters in a story she no longer wished to tell. "You remind me that my contract grants you the power to terminate my position. Let me spare you the deliberation." With deliberate care, she grasped the contract's edges and tore it cleanly in half. The sound echoed in the quiet room like a thunderclap. "I hereby resign as CEO of Sinclair Developments, effective immediately. My final act will be to present the board with 2 options. Join me in reimagining corporate responsibility through sustainable community development, or watch as I demonstrate this model's success independently." Harrison stirred. "Claudia, think about—" "I have thought," she interrupted, continuing to tear the contract methodically, letting the pieces fall like autumn leaves. "I thought about it while watching a master craftsman restore not just an engine, but my faith in what business could be. I thought about it while reading thank you cards from children whose potential outshines our quarterly projections. I thought about it all night as we mapped the hidden resources of a town that everyone else dismissed as worthless." She stood, moving to the window where the desert sun had reached its full morning glory. Below, Phoenix's corporate towers gleamed like mirages, beautiful but ultimately insubstantial. "My grandfather used to say that any fool can tear something down. The real art is in building something that lasts." She touched her grease-stained cufflinks, smiling at the memory. He wasn't just talking about engines. Her phone buzzed with incoming board messages, but they seemed to come from another world now. The torn contract lay scattered across the hotel room's carpet, its legal poetry reduced to confetti. "What will you do?" Harrison asked quietly. Claudia pulled out Manny's proposal, unfolding it with the reverence of a new constitution. "First, I'm going to show a town full of forgotten potential exactly what they're worth. Then, I'm going to help them build something that matters." She paused, a hint of her old corporate steel entering her voice. "And then, I'm going to prove that conscious development isn't just morally right. It's profitable in ways those quarterly reports can never measure." She gathered the torn pieces of her old life, dropping them into the wastebasket with a finality that felt like freedom. On her laptop screen, the Vale Vista proposals shone with promise: water rights, renewable energy possibilities, educational initiatives, all anchored by a youth center that would teach more than just mechanics. "Harrison," she said softly, "you once told me I was the best corporate strategist you'd ever seen. Want to help me strategize something worthwhile for a change?" He looked at the torn contract, then at the Vale Vista plans with their carefully plotted path towards sustainable growth. 20 years of corporate law practice had taught him to recognize watersheds when he saw them. "They'll say you've lost your mind," he warned, but he was already reaching for the proposal. "No," Claudia smiled, thinking of an engine restored to its true purpose, of a town waiting to remember its worth, of a future built on foundations stronger than quick profits. "I've finally found it." The morning sun streamed through the window, catching the edge of her grandfather's cufflinks and the scattered pieces of her old contract. Outside, the desert waited, hiding aquifers of possibility beneath its seemingly barren surface. It was time to start digging deeper. The architectural plans for the new community center covered Manny's workbench, their crisp blue lines a stark contrast to the well-worn surface. 3 weeks had passed since Claudia's decision, and Vale Vista was still adjusting to the earthquake of possibility she'd unleashed. "See here," she explained, pointing to a detailed section. "The main workshop will have 16 stations, each one equipped with both traditional tools and modern diagnostic equipment. We're not just teaching auto mechanics, we're creating a bridge between old wisdom and new technology." Manny traced the drawings with a careful finger, his expression a mix of wonder and cautious hope. The plans showed more than just a building. They revealed a future he'd glimpsed, but never dared fully imagine. "And this area?" he asked, indicating a large space adjacent to the main floor. "Computer lab and collaborative workspace. Miss Sarah's been helping design the educational programs." Claudia smiled, remembering the teacher's tears when she'd first seen the proposals. "We're partnering with 3 technical colleges. The kids can earn certification credits while they're still in high school." The morning light streamed through the garage's open door, carrying the sounds of preliminary survey work from across the street. The youth center's old building would remain, restored, not replaced, while the new complex grew around it like a garden of opportunity. "Tommy's already asking about the apprenticeship program," Manny said, his voice rough with emotion. "Boy couldn't sleep after you mentioned the partnership with the electric vehicle manufacturers. He'll be in the first class." Claudia pulled out another set of drawings. "In fact, I want you to help design the advanced curriculum. Your father's methods, updated for modern systems, the best of both worlds." The plans seemed to glow in the morning light, their careful measurements and annotations describing more than just rooms and equipment. Each line represented a thread of hope, each specification a promise of renewal. "The board's reaction?" Manny asked quietly. Claudia laughed, surprising them both with its lightness. "Let's just say that when the geological surveys and water rights analysis hit their desks, several members suddenly discovered their social consciousness." She pointed to another section of the plans. "See this wing? Named for one of our newest partners. Seems my resignation letter sparked some interesting conversations about corporate legacy." Outside, a truck delivered the first load of surveying equipment. Local kids gathered to watch, their excited chatter drifting through the open door. Word had spread quickly in Vale Vista. Something was happening, something real. "We're not just Building a training center, Claudia continued, her finger tracing the planned garden spaces and solar arrays. We're creating a template. Sustainable development, educational opportunity, community renewal, all growing from the foundation that was here all along. Manny nodded, understanding. Like an engine, a community needed more than just new parts. It needed someone to see its true potential, to restore it with respect for its original design. The water rights, he said, you'll protect them? Already done, trust established, community oversight. No corporation can ever divert that aquifer. She smiled. Some resources belong to the future, not the quarterly reports. A familiar voice called from the doorway. Tommy stood there, clutching a handful of papers. Mr. Martinez, Miss Sinclair, we were wondering. He gestured to where several other teenagers waited nervously. Could we maybe look at the plans? Claudia exchanged glances with Manny, seeing her own emotion reflected in his eyes. Come on in, she called. After all, we're building this for you. The teens gathered around the workbench, their questions tumbling over each other with growing excitement. Each query revealed another seed of possibility, another dream taking root in fertile soil. When can we start? Tommy asked, his finger tracing the outline of the main workshop. Claudia looked at these children of Vale Vista, seeing in their faces the same potential she'd first recognized in a broken engine. We already have, she said softly. Everything that matters always starts with people willing to see beneath the surface. The morning sun climbed higher, casting the shadow of Manny's garage across the architectural plans like a blessing. Outside, survey stakes marked the boundaries of coming change, while inside, gathered around a workbench that had witnessed decades of careful repair, the future was already taking shape, measured in blue lines, young voices, and the quiet certainty that some investments yield returns too precious for any balance sheet to capture. The Vale Vista Herald hadn't published a print edition in 5 years, but today's front page, freshly framed on Manny's wall, declared in bold letters, Desert Town's Renaissance, How a Broken Engine Sparked a Revolution. Below the headline, a photo showed Claudia and Manny standing before the youth center, Tommy and his friends clustered around them, all eyes focused on the future rising from the desert soil. Third national outlet picked up the story this morning, Miss Sarah said, adjusting her reading glasses as she scanned the article. CNN's sending a crew next week. They're calling it the Vale Vista model. She smiled, touching the photograph. Though they seem more interested in the corporate angle than the children. That's because they don't understand yet, Claudia replied, watching through the window as construction crews worked on the community center's foundation. This was never about corporate strategy. It's about recognizing potential in unexpected places. The article detailed the changes sweeping through Vale Vista like a desert wind. The technical training center was just the beginning. 2 technology companies had already announced plans to build data centers, attracted by the abundant aquifer and the promise of a skilled local workforce. The railroad company was restoring the freight connection, creating an artery of commerce that would pump new life into the region. Look at this quote, Miss Sarah said, reading from the paper. Ms. Sinclair's resignation from Sinclair Developments has sparked a national conversation about sustainable corporate investment in rural communities. They're calling it conscious capitalism, she chuckled. Fancy words for what we've known all along, that every place has value if you look with the right eyes. Manny nodded toward Main Street, where workers were renovating the old storefronts. Jim's talking about reopening the diner. Says with the construction crews and new businesses coming in, he'll need twice the space he had before. The Herald's article continued down the page, documenting the ripples of change. Property values had doubled since Claudia's announcement, but strict community oversight ensured that development served the town's long-term interests. The Water Rights Trust she'd established had become a model for other communities seeking to protect their natural resources. Tommy's interview turned out well, Claudia noted, indicating a sidebar featuring the teenager's photograph. His quoted words captured the spirit of transformation. It's not just about learning to fix engines anymore. We're learning how to build a future. Outside, the sound of construction mixed with children's voices from the temporary classroom trailers. The youth center's programs had already outgrown their original space, but no one minded the crowding. Every cramped moment was proof of promise being fulfilled. The other towns have been calling, Miss Sarah mentioned, folding the newspaper carefully, asking how they can replicate what we're doing here, as if it were just a matter of following. A blueprint. It's not the program they need to copy, Claudia said, thinking of that first day in Manny's garage. It's the perspective, the willingness to look past surface damage and see the potential underneath. The article's final paragraphs quoted financial analysts debating the broader implications of Vale Vista's transformation. Some praised the sustainable development model. Others questioned the prioritization of community benefits over immediate returns. But the numbers were becoming harder to argue with. Property values rising, young families moving in, new businesses breaking ground every month. They still don't quite get it, Manny said, gesturing to the corporate analysis. They're looking for a formula, a strategy they can package and replicate. But what happened here, he paused, searching for words, began with an act of trust. Claudia finished, with someone refusing payment for honest work, asking only that we consider a different kind of value. Miss Sarah touched the framed article again, her fingers tracing the faces of her students, captured in newsprint. The real story isn't in here, is it? It's out there, in Tommy teaching younger kids about diagnostic systems, in families moving back because they see a future here again, in children realizing they don't have to leave home to find opportunity. Through the window, they watched as a tour group from another struggling town walked past, their guides pointing out the elements of Vale Vista's renaissance. But Claudia knew they were missing the most important part, the invisible current of hope that now flowed through the community like the hidden aquifer beneath their feet, nourishing everything it touched. Well, Manny said finally, I suppose we should get back to work. That future won't build itself. The morning sun caught the frame's glass, reflecting their images over the headline's bold promise. Outside, Vale Vista hummed with purpose, its rhythm as steady and true as a perfectly tuned engine. The new sign above Manny's garage caught the morning light, its freshly painted letters declaring Martinez Technical Institute and Auto Repair. Below, in smaller text, training tomorrow's masters today, but it was the original Martinez Auto. Sign that still held pride of place, restored rather than replaced, much like Vale Vista itself. Your father would have loved this, Claudia said, watching as Manny adjusted the angle of the historic sign. 3 months had transformed more than just the building's facade. The garage had expanded, incorporating the adjacent storefront into a learning space where traditional tools met cutting-edge technology. Pop always said a good name was built, not bought, Manny replied, stepping back to survey their work, though I'm not sure he imagined all this. He gestured to the window where diagnostic computers lined the walls, their screens displaying real-time data from the practice engines in the workshop. Inside, Tommy was leading a group of younger students through a hybrid engine simulation. His confidence had grown with his responsibilities, his natural talent for teaching matching his mechanical aptitude. See how the power curve changes? His voice carried through the open door. That's what Mr. Martinez meant about understanding the system's soul, not just its symptoms. Claudia smiled, recognizing her own words about corporate transformation, echoed in Tommy's lesson. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Both engines and communities needed caretakers who could see beneath surface problems to core potential. Latest enrollment numbers came in, she said, pulling out her tablet. Her corporate wardrobe had evolved too, now favoring clothes that could move easily from boardroom to workshop. We're going to need that expansion sooner than planned. Words Spreading faster than we anticipated, the morning sun climbed higher, highlighting the changes along Main Street. Jim's diner was doing brisk business, serving breakfast to a mix of construction workers, new residents, and students. The restored bank building now housed a technology incubator, its windows gleaming with promise instead of vacancy. Sarah mentioned, "You've been getting more calls," Manny said, carefully storing his father's tools in their new home. A glass display case that served as both protection and inspiration. "Other towns wanting to know the secret," as if it were that simple, Claudia replied, watching a group of surveyors stake out the next phase of development. "They all want to know about the investment structure, the technical programs, the water rights management, but they miss the essential truth, which is that true value isn't created by external investment alone. It grows from within, from people who never stopped believing in possibility." She touched the old sign gently. "From places that kept their heart even when the world looked away." The sound of engines starting drew their attention to the workshop. Tommy's class was moving from theory to practice, young hands eager to apply their knowledge. The mixture of excitement and focus on their faces reflected something beyond mere technical training. "You know what I love most about that sign?" Claudia gestured to the blended old and new lettering above them. "It tells a story of continuity, not replacement. We're not erasing what was here. We're building on it, enhancing it, helping it grow into what it always could have been." Manny nodded, understanding. The same philosophy guided everything they'd done in Vale Vista, preserving the town's character while opening new possibilities, maintaining its soul while strengthening its foundations. A sleek electric vehicle pulled up, bearing the logo of one of their new corporate partners. Another group of investors coming to study the Vale Vista model. They would tour the facilities, examine the programs, crunch the numbers. Some would understand, others wouldn't. "Should I give them the usual tour?" Manny asked, watching the visitors emerge in their pressed suits and polished shoes. "No," Claudia smiled, seeing herself from 3 months ago in their eager, calculating expressions. "Let Tommy do it. Let them see our future through his eyes. Sometimes the best way to understand value is to watch it teach others." The morning light caught both signs now, the restored original and its modern edition, making them glow like beacons. Below, Tommy was already greeting the visitors, his confidence and passion visible in every gesture as he prepared to show them what was possible when people looked past surface appearances to the true engine of community. "Well," Manny said quietly, "I suppose we should go hear how he tells our story." Together they walked into the transformed garage, where the past and future had found a way to work in perfect harmony, like a masterfully tuned engine hitting all the right notes. The partnership agreement looked different from any corporate document Claudia had ever signed. Printed on heavy paper that matched the texture of Manny's original invoice pad, it bore both traditional legal language and hand-drawn annotations that spoke of deeper commitments. "Martinez Sinclair Community Development Trust," read the header, with a simple mission statement below, "Building futures by honoring foundations." "Your lawyer friend did a good job with this," Manny said, studying. The document spread across his father's workbench, making sure the legal parts protect the human parts. Harrison, who'd flown in from New York for the signing, smiled slightly. "First time I've included mechanical wisdom in a corporate charter. All development decisions must respect the original. Design while enhancing natural potential." He shook his head in wonder. "The Bar Association won't know what to make of that." The morning sun streamed through windows that had been enlarged but not replaced, casting light on the gathering of people who represented Vale Vista's transformation. Miss Sarah stood with Tommy and a group of advanced students, their newly earned technical certifications proudly displayed. Jim from the diner had brought coffee in cups bearing his restored restaurant's logo. Even the bank manager, recently returned to reopen the local branch, waited with quiet dignity. "The trust structure is unique," Harrison explained to the assembled community leaders. It ensures that Vale Vista's development remains true to its character while creating opportunities for growth. Every project must meet both profit and purpose. Criteria. Claudia watched the faces around her as Harrison outlined the technical details. She saw understanding in their eyes. These people knew the difference between surface modification and true enhancement. They'd lived it. The apprenticeship program is legally protected, she added, gesturing to Tommy and his fellow students. No future board can redirect those resources. The next generation of craftsmen will always have a place to learn, to grow, to build their own legacies. Tommy stepped forward, holding something carefully wrapped in oil-stained cloth. "We wanted to add something to the agreement," he said, his voice steady with new confidence. "Something Mr. Martinez's father started, and we've all continued." He unwrapped the package to reveal a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with decades of mechanical observations, repair notes, and hard-won wisdom. "Every master technician here will contribute to this," Tommy explained. "Not just technical knowledge, but the understanding that comes from seeing beneath the surface. We thought maybe it should be part of the official record." Claudia felt tears threatening as Manny added the notebook to the document pile. This was corporate law, transformed by human truth, legal structure given life by community spirit. "There's one more thing," Harrison said, turning to a specific page. "The expansion clause. Other towns have been asking to replicate this model. The Trust has first rights to help develop similar programs, ensuring the philosophy spreads, not just the structure." The gathered citizens of Vale Vista nodded in appreciation. They had seen their town's resurrection become a beacon of hope for other struggling communities. Delegation visits had become weekly events, each group seeking to understand how transformation could grow from respect rather than replacement. "Before we sign," Manny said quietly, "I'd like to show you all something." He opened his father's toolbox, now more ceremonial than functional, and removed a carefully preserved photograph. "This was taken the day Pop opened the garage. He's standing with my mother and the town council, holding a similar agreement. Their vision was smaller, maybe, but the heart was the same." The photo passed from hand to hand, each person recognizing in those hopeful faces the same spirit that had brought them to this moment. "We're not just signing a partnership," Claudia realized aloud. "We're renewing a promise. One that never really died, it just needed someone to believe in it again." The morning light strengthened, illuminating the document that would guide Vale Vista's future. One by one, they stepped forward to sign. Not just Claudia and Manny, but community leaders, educators, students. Each signature represented a thread in the fabric of renewal, a commitment to building something that would outlast them all. "Well," Harrison said finally, adding his own signature with uncharacteristic emotion, "I believe this makes it official. Though somehow, watching all of you, I suspect it's been official in the ways that matter for quite some time." The partnership agreement gleamed in the morning light, its pages recording not just legal obligations, but the architecture of hope, certified by ink and honored by hearts that had learned to see value in its truest form. The time capsule gleamed in the desert sunlight, its stainless steel surface reflecting the faces of the gathered crowd. 1 year to the day since a broken Bentley had rolled into Manny's garage, Vale Vista's citizens had assembled to preserve their story for future generations. "First," Claudia announced, holding up a carefully preserved check, "the payment that was never cashed." The blank check she'd offered Manny that first day now bore a simple notation: "Value cannot always be measured in dollars." She placed it carefully in the capsule as Tommy stepped forward with the next item. "Mr. Martinez's father's first wrench," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd, "the one he used to teach 3 generations of mechanics." The tool gleamed with decades of use and care, its worn surfaces telling stories of countless repairs and lessons passed down. Miss Sarah contributed a stack of thank you cards bound with faded ribbon. "From the youth center's first year," she explained, "to its most recent graduates. The cards spanned half a century of hope, their messages bridging time with dreams both realized and renewed. The contents of the capsule told Vale Vista's story in artifacts carefully chosen for their meaning. The original land deed that had revealed the aquifer's true value, a piece of the old garage sign, preserved when the new one was installed. The first certification earned by a student in the technical training program, Tommy's, naturally. "This," Manny said, placing a small vial of oil in the capsule, "is from the engine that started it all. Still running perfectly, I might add." He smiled at Claudia, who touched her grandfather's cufflinks in response. The mayor, recently returned from retirement to help guide the town's renaissance, added the partnership agreement's original signing page. "So they'll understand that legal documents can have heart," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Each item carried meaning beyond its physical form. A railroad spike from the restored track that now brought new life to the town. A water sample from the protected aquifer. The first dollar earned by Jim's reopened diner, already expanded twice to handle growing demand. "And this," Claudia said, removing her grandfather's cufflinks, "to remind them that sometimes you have to remember who you are before you can become who you're meant to be." The silver wrench and pen design caught the sunlight as she placed them in the capsule. The crowd had grown as they added each item. Former residents who'd moved back, drawn by opportunity and renewal. New families attracted by the technical training programs and sustainable development. Corporate partners who'd learned to measure success in generations rather than quarters. "One more thing," Tommy said, stepping forward again. He held up a diagnostic printout from the Bentley's repair, the readout that showed us what was possible when you look past surface problems to underlying potential. The paper joined the other artifacts, a technical testament to human insight. Miss Sarah's students, now numbering in the hundreds, had prepared essays describing their town's transformation. These too went into the capsule, along with photographs documenting the changes. Empty buildings becoming alive again, young people finding purpose in workshops and classrooms, a community remembering its worth. "We seal this capsule," the mayor proclaimed, "not just to preserve our past, but to guide our future. Let those who open it in 50 years find not just artifacts, but inspiration." As the capsule was lowered into its foundation beneath the new community center, Claudia felt the weight of the moment. Around her, Vale Vista hummed with purposeful activity. Construction continued on the expanded technical campus. Students moved between classes, carrying tablets and tools with equal comfort. The desert wind carried the sound of progress, tempered by wisdom. "You know what I hope they find when they open it?" Manny said quietly, standing beside her. "Not just the story of what we built, but how we built it. The understanding that true value grows from respect for what exists and vision for what could be." The capsule's seal locked with a decisive click, securing its contents for future generations. Above it would rise the next phase of Vale Vista's growth. New classrooms, workshops, and community spaces. But its foundation would always rest on the artifacts of transformation, a wrench, a check never cashed, and the profound truth that some investments yield returns too precious for any balance sheet to capture. "Well," Tommy said, already turning toward the garage where his next class waited, "guess we should get back to work. Future's not going to build itself." The desert sun climbed higher, casting their shadows across the capsule's resting place, like bridges between past and future, each one anchored in the simple wisdom that had started it all. Sometimes the greatest potential lies in the places others have forgotten how to see. The evening sun painted Vale Vista in shades of promise, its golden light catching the restored buildings and new construction in equal measure. From the community center's observation deck, Claudia and Manny watched the town's silhouette transform. As day yielded to dusk, each shadow telling part of their story, the garage's dual signs stood as sentinels to change and continuity. Beyond them, the youth center's expanded campus hummed with evening activities, its windows bright with purpose. The restored railroad tracks gleamed like silver threads connecting past and future, while solar arrays tracked the setting sun like mechanical flowers. "Hard to believe it all started with a broken timing chain," Manny said, his voice carrying the quiet satisfaction of a master craftsman surveying good work. "Some might call that fate," Claudia replied, touching her collar where her grandfather's cufflinks had rested before joining the time capsule. "But I think it was something else, something about seeing value where others saw only problems." Below them, Tommy led his evening class through the garage's open doors, his students a mix of ages and backgrounds united by common purpose. Their voices carried up to the observation deck, technical terms mingling with laughter and shared discovery. "You know what my father would have loved most about all this?" Manny gestured to the transformed panorama before them. "Not the new buildings or the advanced equipment. He would have loved that we fixed it without losing its soul." The desert wind carried the scent of Jim's Diner's evening coffee, mixed with the subtle percussion of machine shops and computer labs working in harmony. Vale Vista had found its rhythm, its tempo, neither rushed by blind progress nor stalled by rigid tradition. "The governor's office called again," Claudia mentioned, watching a group of visitors tour the technical campus. "They want to make the Vale Vista model the template for rural development across the state. Harrison's already drafted the framework." "And what did you tell them?" "The templates are just the beginning. Real change happens when people learn to see beneath surface problems to core potential." She smiled, remembering her own transformation. Rather like diagnosing an engine. The sun touched the horizon, setting the town's western windows ablaze. New families walked Main Street, passing restored facades that housed tech startups beside traditional businesses. The protected aquifer nourished growth both seen and unseen, like hope made liquid. "Tommy's been offered that teaching position," Manny said proudly. "Lead instructor for the advanced certification program. Boy who once kicked my door in frustration, now showing others how to build futures. Some engines just need the right kind of care," Claudia replied, echoing words she'd heard in his garage that first day. They stood in comfortable silence as twilight gathered, watching their shared vision continue to unfold. The town's lights began to twinkle on, each one a star in a constellation of renewal. From the tech incubator's modern gleam to the heritage building's warm glow, Vale Vista had become something unique, a place where progress served tradition, and tradition guided progress. "Do you ever miss it?" Manny asked quietly. "The corporate world, the power, the pure profit motive?" Claudia considered the desert sunset before them, its beauty enhanced rather than diminished by the signs of human aspiration rising against it. "I haven't lost power," she answered thoughtfully. "I found a better way to use it, building things that last, measuring success in generations rather than quarters." The final rays of sun caught the water tower's fresh paint, where the town's new motto echoed their journey. "Vale Vista, where value runs deep." Below it, Tommy's class was ending, his students departing with the quiet confidence of people who understood their own worth. "Well," Manny said finally, "I suppose we should head down. Tomorrow's another day of building futures." Claudia nodded, taking a last look at the panorama before them. In the gathering dusk, Vale Vista glowed with more than just artificial light. It shone with the kind of value that balance sheets could never capture. The worth of community restored, of potential recognized, of hope renewed. Together they descended toward the garage where their story had begun, where a broken engine had revealed the true meaning of value, and where future generations would learn to see beneath the surface of things to the endless possibility within.